everybody, welcome back to another episode of Chasing Frets. And as you heard on Monday, I'm joined this week by Ben Harper and my co-host here, Andy Ellis.
Hello.
And it was so great to hear Ben tell the story behind his new record, which I know for guitar nerds has in the back of our mind, we've been hoping that one day he'll come around and just make a solo guitar record.
You know, and Ben has deep roots. And in this episode, we will hear about the epicenter of his nurturing musical background, the Folk Music Center in Claremont, California, a music store he grew up in. And in his words, he explains the significance of having this kind of childhood.
Yeah, and the first time I really heard about this was years ago. There was a documentary out called Pleasure and Pain, and it follows him to the Folk Music Center, and it interviews his grandfather and his mother, and kind of gives, and you see it. And I know you were actually, as we talk in the episode, you actually got to go there, Andy, and visit.
Yeah, and hang out. Ben gave me a tour. We even ate at a fantastic Mexican restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was where he had eaten tacos as a kid for all his life, you know? And so, yeah.
It was, so if you're not near Claremont, and it's still open to this day, his mom runs it, Ellen, and she gets a nice shout out in this episode as well. And but if you're not near there, you can check out that Pleasure and Pain documentary, and that gives you a bit more of the backstory about his grandfather and that store. So this is a very interesting episode. He tells some things that I've never really heard him talk about before, and even shares a special text message from his mom that was really cool when he pulled that out. So dig into this second episode with Ben Harper, and we'll see you later this week. Everybody, welcome back. We're here with our guest, Ben Harper, this week. And today we wanted to talk about a little bit of your backstory and kind of where you came from and the history of your family's music store. And it kind of took the name from one of the songs, or you took the name of this area, Inland Empire, as one of the songs on your new record, Winter is for Lovers. So before we go into your backstory, tell me about what was it about that song that made you think of the Inland Empire and want to name it after it?
The piece reminds me of something. It reminds me of the region for whatever, and I can't say that I necessarily wrote it there, but I wrote it with that region in mind. It just reminded me of something I would have heard or played in that music store. It to me puts me there. To play it, when I play it, I feel like I'm back home.
You know, in the first episode of this week's podcast, I alluded to coming to see you for 2 days, which is unheard of anymore. To send a journalist out to do a story. Sorry, everybody, the budgets don't exist. That was back then. But to go back to no, it's never mind. It's different. But I came, flew into, probably the John Wayne Airport and holed up in a hotel, and you took me off to Silver Lake, where we spent the first day talking about the new album and your Weissenborn, and I got to play it, and then the second day, you picked me up and we drove in your pickup truck out to Claremont, and I got to walk through the doors of the Folk Music Center and see this nurturing environment. I mean, it became clear to me. It was something that you don't understand it till you stand in it. It's like, oh yeah, I know Ben came out of this folk music tradition, and his grandfather runs this. No, you walk in and you see these instruments from all over the world, and you see where classes are held in different types of folk music traditions. And I got to meet Charles, your grandfather, Charles Chase. It was like suddenly Ben's history became real, And then you took me back to the workbench where you put in a lot of time as a kid, if I understand it right, or as a young person.
Thousands of hours.
Thousands of hours. I even have photos of all the guitar cases that were waiting, either had been repaired or about to be repaired. You know, I mean, it's crazy, and it was not exactly a museum, because a museum connotes this static, dusty. We're going to go look at something and then step back and marvel at it. You know, this was an ongoing, dynamic space, but it had history, and I can't help but think when I listen to your music that history that I felt walking into the Folk Music Center is embodied in the notes and the songs and how you sing as well as how you play. What is it about history that makes today's music come alive?
What is it about history that makes today's music come alive? Not necessarily mine, but just in general.
Yes.
What I love about history and its contribution to present and future music is that it is a stone in the pathway of musical evolution, artistic evolution, and creative progress. It's a rung on the ladder. You know, I was able to, you know, Taj Mahal is heavily influential to me for 100 reasons, but one of which was I had been seeing Taj Mahal do finger-picking instrumentals since I was of memory, since I can remember seeing music. He would always stop his shows with instrumentals. So between Taj's finger-picking and his braveness to bring instrumental music to the blues in a way that I had never heard before, my love of flamenco and classical music, and being able to see firsthand Chris Darrow and David Lindley in that music store with Ry Cooder all the while in the background, there was no way I wasn't going to get a piece of that. And so with Taj, you know, you could set the second hand by Taj's thumb and David's sense of melody and Chris's depth of grit when it comes to the way he played the blues and lap steel. And I hope that this record, you know, maybe a kid will come up that wouldn't have heard lap steel otherwise and get bit, you know, and hear it and check it. There is a firm sense of tradition that I have been raised with in you know, in handing the baton off. And I've loved getting to know those guys better in my adult life because, you know, I had followed them around like a puppy dog when I was a kid, and now to get to run and I'm not vaulting myself to any status undeserved, but you know, I've had a chance to get to know some of these guys as friends as an adult, and it's been a great privilege, and I still have so much to learn from them. So as far as the history, without the history of the music and the tradition of sharing the music with one another, I would have felt a bit adrift for sure. I mean, there are some people that are beamed down from outer space like Prince, you know, but even Hendrix was touring with Little Richard and Curtis Mayfield. You can hear the direct correlate. You take Curtis Mayfield, Little Richard, and the 60s rock and roll boom, and Hendrix makes perfect sense, right?
So the other co-host on the show is a guy named Joe Gore.
Oh, Joe is just, I mean, what a freaking player.
When I told him that you were going to be on the show, he sent in a question that relates to our topic here. He said, wow, what is it about the Claremont Vortex, about how this tiny little college town managed to produce you, Lindley, and Buckethead?
Claremont there's a gravitational pull to this place for sure. My grandparents, that they would land there and be able to the McCabe family were influenced by my family's music store to start McCabe's in Santa Monica. I mean, something about that region, there's something to it right in between. It's like a way station between the desert and the city. It attracts a very specific frequency that has enabled that music store to have the door open for 62 years.
And it's still open today?
Still open. I was there last night.
Working on some guitars?
Yeah. It's given me a chance to catch up with a lot of stuff under that roof.
And I don't know, Jason, if you know this, but Ben purchased the store to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And your mom, if I'm not mistaken,
My
runs
mom,
the store.
my mom Ellen runs the store, and we have a great staff: Marguerite, Jerry, Dave, Henry. Incredible full-time staff that are a huge part of its daily celebration of existence.
That's amazing.
62 years, man.
The kind of I won't say a bubble, but the area you were in, all these influences that were coming in, Lindley and all these other people. And growing up, what you know is what you know. And it's hard to kind of put that in perspective until you go out into the world and come back. What kind of perspective did you have on that Claremont scene and the people who came through that store after you had gone out in the world and toured around the world for a couple of years? How did that change your perspective on how special that scene was?
It made it more and more so. Because when you have nothing, the people around you are everything. And the way that community shared with an open door, once I got to a place creatively, there were people making calls for me. David Lindley made calls to help me. Chris Darrow was making calls to help me. And people wanted one another to take flight, and too many to name. But boy, the power of people rooting for you and being in your corner and really being willing to sit through the music you're making when it's not where it should be, and to remain motivating and supportive. It was an incubator for sure. So that played a huge role in it. Yeah.
When I came to visit you for that cover story, I landed near Hollywood, and I'd go in periodically to Hollywood to interview other people, Slash and other guitarists in that era. And every time I stepped into Hollywood, I had this sense, I could smell it in the air, and I called it naked ambition. I could just smell it in the air. And everybody in Hollywood, musicians, actors, of course, the movie was the dominant thing, but musicians as well, just naked ambition has an odor. And for me, it is not a pleasant odor. Now Silver Lake is away from that, did not have the stink of naked ambition. But when you took me to Claremont, it suddenly the skies cleared, and the air was just different. And I didn't sense in the store, guitar stores, that you must get this a lot too. I mean, it can be really annoying if you go into certain guitar stores because the clerks and everybody there are kind of like, yeah, well, we got this club, man, and we know more than you do. And, how many times have we been dissed, especially when we were young, going into a music store? Well, Folk Music Center people, anyone listening to this, and if you find yourself out there, go visit and see if tell me. Do you smell naked ambition in there? No.
Yeah, and look, virtuosity is marvelous and a sight, and it is a spectacular moment to witness. But in that music store, well, let me speak to that first. We were too far away from LA to even we were so far removed from the scene that you'd be silly being ambitious in the Inland Empire and in a folk music store in the Inland. You would look, not to say that I wasn't ambitious, but I also had no choice but to exceed my own expectations as a lap steel guitarist. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to join a big band with a saxophone. I wasn't gonna, especially in the beginning, go up and stand up and play the guitar. I was going to go up on stage, whether it was in front of 50,000 people or 50 people. I was going to be sitting down a lot of the time, if not the entire show. It was a different, it wasn't as though I had to lower expectations. It's just, I was raised to be a realist. And you ask how many kids had seen a lap steel player up to that point from my generation. You know what I mean? I may as well have been up there with a harmonium and a monkey on my shoulder. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that was the norm. So defying the expectations and even defying the odds, because the odds of getting in the door of a major label in the 90s as a folk musician were, 1 in a trillion. But the odds of getting in the door with a lap steel were 1. It's just 1. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to, but it was, So there was, to be ambitious would have been really, really counterproductive. But then, more to the point, I was raised in an environment where where not at the time because he wasn't on the scene yet. I'm talking late 80s, 90s. But Daniel Johnson, rest in peace, gets as much respect as John McLaughlin. And I know it's to get your head around that, right? But it's just what it was. Wow. I'm going to be blown away by John McLaughlin. He's going to change my life. I'll have a spiritual awakening. And Daniel Johnson, you'll have to mop me up from the floor because I'll be crying. Both have their place in the choir. And what it did is it expanded the choir. It expanded the choir. You may see a sitar virtuoso come in. You may see a tabla virtuoso. You may see someone on the saz. You may see, a ukulele. And then it was as much about soul as it was substance. And felt, And I've always, that's also a huge part of keeping the place alive.
The two videos that I've seen from the new album, which these are pre-release videos, but they're on YouTube, the new album, Winter is for Lovers. The stage that it's shot on, when I watch these videos, watch you playing, very intimate, again, just you with Monteleone, live playing, just you start and you play and you end, it's a performance. But the stage, is that the Folk Music Center, or is that something? Where is that? Because of all the instruments, the sarod and a couple of your skateboards.
That's the Folk Music Center. When we're not doing open mic nights or concerts. Last Sunday of every month we do open mic nights. We do 2 or 3 locally promoted concerts a month. And I don't think it was there when you were there. I mean, we've since built it. We're one of the only places. I mean, I think we've got the strongest open mic night 100 miles around, north, south, east, west. People come from all over. Phoebe Bridges, cut her live chops there back in the day. And the Black Pumas got a lift off there as well. It's a thing, proud to say. And I don't think we had it quite in full swing when we were in the late 90s. But since then, that's been a huge, part of our foundation and framework is that stage. And it's just little, low, one step up, humble. But, we need the space for retail. We can't have a designated stage. So, during business hours, some people will just sit up there and break into song during business hours. And that's usually okay,
Depending on how loud the Marshall is, No, I don't know.
Depending on whether or not it's a banjo.
So I want to wrap up this episode with one last question. And we talked on the previous episode about how it was the end result of this record was a lot based on feedback from your friends and family when they saw you perform.
Yeah. And that moment where it was just the play I had just never heard. It was there was just this moment where it came to life on its own that reminded me that that's all it needed to be. But yeah.
So I remember about 4 years ago, you and your mom came to town for a political event and played a set of duets. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that album that you guys did together.
Thank you.
To me, this newest record is like the most Ben Harper sounding Ben Harper record. And I'm curious, when you played this record for her, the latest, the version of you solo, when you played that for her, what kind of feedback did you get from her? Because she's seen you obviously from day one, and with this, like you're saying, it's taken you till you've been 50 years old to be able to make this record, and Mom was there for every step. What did she say when you sent this record to her?
Mom's not easily amused. Let's let me just preface it with that. I'm going to read you the text she sent me. We won't go too far down that, but if you don't mind, I'm going to frame it. She just wrote, "Oh, Ben, that is the most gorgeous video I've ever seen or heard." It took me till I was 50 to get that.
Yep.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. And by the way, my mom has a new book coming out, Always a Song, and it's about the history of folk music through that music store, and it is a magnificent read. I highly recommend it.
Is it out? Can people get it?
It will. I think you can pre-order it now.
Okay. Like Amazon?
Yep. Always a Song.
Okay. Ellen Harper?
Yep. I wrote the foreword too. I'm quite proud of it. Ellen Harper.
All right, we'll make sure to check that out, and we'll be back later this week with more from Ben.